Well, you're very welcome to this edition of Real Conversations with Kinore. My name is Richard Curran, and I'm delighted to be a guest on this podcast. It's always nice to be a guest, but it's a little bit unusual to be a guest presenter, especially when the person I'm interviewing is the person who normally asks the questions. Larissa Feeney, I'm delighted to be joined by Larissa. Larissa, it's high time you were in the hot seat and answering a few questions on this podcast. How do you feel about talking about yourself? Does that come easily?
No, it does not come easily, not at all. But thank you for being a guest presenter on the podcast, Richard. I'm delighted you're here.
I haven't done it yet. Don't thank me too soon.
I'm delighted you're here, and I'll do my very best to answer your questions. Just be kind.
Kind is my middle name. Larissa, let's start at the beginning. For you, born in Dublin, and the family moved to Sligo.
Born in Dublin and raised in Sligo, yeah. Moved to Sligo whenever we were very young.
How come Sligo? What was the reason?
So we moved to Sligo because my dad would have worked for An Post back in the day, and then for Telecom Éireann, and then in Dercom. And we moved to Sligo because my dad was from Donegal and my mum was from Leitrim, and they wanted somewhere that was pretty much in the middle. So we were about an hour from both grandparents in opposite directions where we settled.
That was a well thought out plan, wasn't it?
Yeah, really was. It worked out really well for them, yeah.
And you were just outside Sligo town. Were you a townie or a rural?
No,
how did that work?
No, I married a townie.
Right.
But no, we were not. I was on the north side, so it wasn't far from W.B. Yeats's grave, actually.
Out near
between
Drumcliff,
it and Ross's Point, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you into school? Were you somebody who was very nose to the grindstone, or were you more likely to be in trouble?
No, I was a very sensible oldest child.
Organised person.
Organised, studious, loved my reading, loved school, always did what I was told, very much a people pleaser, didn't get into trouble. My dad even said that whenever, at my wedding speech, whenever he talked to my wedding, he said that I never gave them a day's trouble. And I never did, and I should have done, of course. But I didn't.
You decided to study hospitality. One of the reasons being that you'd worked in a number of hotels.
Yeah, so I started working in hotels when I was 15, as you do.
What was your first job?
I was waitressing in the Bon Cher in High Street in Sligo. I loved working with people. I loved the hotel industry. And I never remember really getting any advice around what to study in, post-leaving cert. And I went for hospitality management. I don't really know why, other than I liked working in hotels. So I travelled north. It was the Northern Ireland Hotel and Catering College at that time in Portrush. And that's where I studied hotel management. And then I went to McGee in Derry for the last year of the degree, which was Hospitality and Tourism Management at University of Ulster. And
you worked in other hotels as well, in Donegal and Dunfanaghy?
I did. So I worked in what was the Carrigrua Hotel in Dunfanaghy. And I worked in bars in Derry. In nightclubs, in Coleraine, wherever we were, we were able to work in hotels. I worked in America, worked in TGI Fridays in Melbourne, Australia. Like, there's one industry that takes you everywhere.
But it's quite an education, isn't it, dealing with customers and dealing with problems when they arise.
Yeah, it's a great industry for education, for educating a young person on how to deal with people, how to think on your feet, how to deal with pressure. I mean, there's nothing like the feeling you get whenever you're mid-service on a Saturday night and everything's going well. But anything can happen at any minute and you just have to deal with it. And I loved that. But it's hard to do it over the longer term. You're working and everybody else is off. That element is very difficult, especially for family life.
And it's one of the things you mentioned about, things can go wrong. And, a wedding day in a hotel, difficulty in a restaurant, somebody not happy with something, problems with a booking, all that kind of stuff. One of the things that strikes me, though, having spent a long time interviewing and talking to entrepreneurs, they're very good at problem solving, but they also almost like dealing with things that go wrong, because it's going to happen when you run a business all the time. And that experience is a real training for that, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually you make a really good point, because I say to the team all the time, well, we know what the problem is now. So now let's just fix it. It's worse when you don't know what the problem is, or you feel that there's a problem, but you're not too sure what the actual issue is. So yeah, that is great training ground, because you have to think on your feet, but it also really helps you keep in mind the customer, because the customer always comes first. So it was great training from that perspective as well, which is I've really brought with me. It's how important the customer is, to always keep forefront of mind the customer's journey is important, how the customer's feeling is important, and to always make a decision with the customer in mind.
And that's something that has stood to you later on. And we can talk a little bit about the whole accountancy profession and the business. But in the meantime, you had studied hospitality, you enjoyed that. How did the connection with the world of accounting come about?
Like looking back now, accountancy was my best subject in my Leaving Cert. And I don't know why I was never advised to go down that route. I suspect I probably was and I didn't listen. What happened was I got to the end of the summer whenever I was working in the Carrigrue in Dunfanny, and that was a season hotel, so it was really full on. The challenge with season hotels is you don't have a core team. Generally speaking, 20 years on, I'm sure it's changed, but back then there was no core team. So it's really firefighting every day. And it was a tourist town, so it was very busy. I got to the end of that summer and I think I was just very tired. And the Carrigrue closed, so I had to look for a new job anyway. It closed for the season. So I decided I wanted a 9-to-5 job. And I answered a job in the Derry Journal, an advertisement in the Derry Journal for a director of first impressions within an accountancy firm.
A director of first impressions. Did you know what that was?
I figured it out.
What was it?
Receptionist.
Right.
So it was an accountancy firm in Derry run by the managing partner and the owner at the time. He has since retired, was a really forward-thinking guy, right? Director of first impressions, that'll give you a clue. I applied for the role and I had to do a presentation in front of the team. It was the team that picked whoever was going to get the job. And I got the job. So I started off working in reception.
Did you enjoy it?
Loved it. It was really different, Richard. Like, you think about it. I was coming from a hotel environment, which was busy and loud and chaotic, actually. And going into an environment that was luxurious, very quiet, really professional, quite plush. And I just thought, my God, it was amazing to me how people could actually make money in these types of environments, that wasn't mad and busy all the time. So I loved it. I was on reception for about a year. The way that the building was structured, all the trainees were in the top floor. It was like a 3-floor building in Derry, and the trainees were on the top floor. And they were around the same age as I was at that time. So they had just come out of university or they were going the technician's route. So obviously I would have gravitated towards them in terms of friendships. And they would have said to me, would you not consider doing your exams or training? So I was thinking about this, and I just took a notion and I thought, well, do you know what? I'll ask the partner. Now, the partner was scary to me at that time. He
seemed a bit aloof and
absolutely
the boss.
Absolutely. Probably 20 or 25 years older than me, maybe, and obviously an important man in the city. And I wasn't. So I knocked on his door. His office was a big room with a big mahogany desk. And you can imagine the beautiful plush curtains behind him with the big windows looking out over Clarendon Street. And I asked him, I said, I have something to ask you. Would you mind putting me through my accountancy exams? And he said, would you consider doing your company secretarial exams? And I said, no, I want to do my accountancy exams. I didn't have a notion what the company secretarial exams were. And he said, okay, let me think about it. So I walked out the door. And I know as soon as I walked out the door that I went out of his mind. That was the type of man he was, right? He wouldn't have come back to me.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, I walked up the stairs and knocked on the door again. And I asked him, had he thought about it? And to his credit, he said he would. He would let me do my exams. So that September, I was moved up to the top of the house and there was another receptionist appointed and I joined the trainees.
And you really took to it?
I did. I really took to it. I loved it. The first year I was placed first in Northern Ireland in the exams actually, and 10th in Ireland in the Chartered Accountancy exams. It was Prof 2 in those days. I worked really hard. I really loved it. And I asked him, because my degree was in hospitality management. And years later, I asked him why he had said yes to me, because he didn't have to.
Yeah.
And, none of my other colleagues in the trainee room at that time had any type of a background that wasn't accountancy, right? They all had accountancy degrees or accounting technicians. I was really the odd one out. And he said, you got a first in your degree, so I knew you could do it.
And that was it?
That was it.
But even if you had, which you clearly had, an aptitude for it, it doesn't happen accidentally that you get first in Northern Ireland in your first year.
Yeah.
Did you have something to prove? And if so, to whom? To yourself or to the other trainees or the boss?
Yeah, all of the above, I think. There was a lot of imposter in me. I really suffered from imposter syndrome for years afterwards, actually. because I was coming from, again, the chaotic environment of a hotel where you're serving pints and food and you're cleaning up after people. And then you're in this room where, you're having access to really sensitive information about businesses, and you're listening to their challenges. And of course, we were sitting in on meetings with the partners and hearing these big decisions being discussed and decisions being made. And you could hear the qualified accountants, steering business owners in certain ways and meeting with banks, all of that stuff, right? So I was really suffering from imposter syndrome. Plus, again, I was coming from a hospitality background. The other trainees who could have been in the same year as me from a trainee perspective, but they were way ahead of me from a practical perspective. I had no background or very little background in accountancy, and they had loads. So I always felt I was a couple of steps behind. So I was trying to prove myself, I think, to myself and to them, and also trying to validate, the decision that was made to allow me to the exams in the first place.
Would you say that you were always quite a driven or motivated person? Or was this maybe a first real example to yourself, to show yourself that that's who you were?
I think it was probably the first real example. Like, I didn't do great in my leaving cert, Richard. Okay, I got a first in my degree. I really came out of myself in college, I think, in general. But this was probably the first real example of deciding to do something and then getting it done, yeah.
So after you did that, you worked in industry for a while, and you had an opportunity then to work in a firm in Claudy, in County Derry.
It was an elderly accountant based outside of Derry, and he needed some help. So I helped him for that first season, and then I actually bought the clients off him, and that's how it started.
And that was it. So
that was it.
That was a big step.
It was. And my father, God rest him, lent me the money to make the first payment. It was only 30 clients. It wasn't a big portfolio.
But you were crossing the threshold of a door there where you were becoming an entrepreneur at that point in time.
Yeah. Now the retiring accountant said to me, look, I'm going to give you first refusal. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And as I said, my dad lent me the money to buy those first clients. And
were you nervous about that?
I was, because I'd never taken money that way off my dad, and I had to pay him back at €400 a month.
You still remember that number?
I still remember that number. €400 a month is what I had to pay him back. And that was the first step into owning the business, yeah.
And then really after that, you moved to a point where you began to think about doing things differently, and you were thinking about website and marketing and online. That was clearly very much on your mind.
2011 was when I thought about, okay, it's time to build a website. It's time to, put myself out there in some way. So I did. Now, there wasn't a huge amount of accountancy websites in Ireland at that time, but whatever ones were there were very same. You could probably picture what they look like. So I started looking in the UK sites as well. The UK has always been a little bit ahead in our industry. I remember one specific site. It had a picture of, the Royal Mail post box, the red post box. And it had, 1, 2, 3, you send us your records, we prepare your accounts, we send them to you for signature, something like that. It was really simple, right? And I thought, that's it really interesting, because I was in Donegal, and this was recession times, right? So, it was very hard to get new clients, and the great accountants in Donegal, and you can't go and take clients off them. So I thought, well, that might work. So I actually put 2 websites live on the same day, Larissa Feeney & Co. and what it was accountantonline.ie, which was essentially our version of the red post box and the 1, 2, 3. And it was that website that actually gained traction. And the first call I got from that website was from a business in Cork. And I remember thinking, okay, that's wow. How did he find me? He's in Cork.
And that opened up a world of opportunity.
Because then I realised that location's not an issue. The client doesn't care where you are. The client wants their work done. The client wants to get you whenever they need you, but they don't care where their work is done.
You must have been working very hard, though. A lot of pressure around that at that time.
There was. Like, in those days were hard anyway. Myself and my husband were working 3 days and 3 days. So we didn't have childcare, apart from every now and then. I was building the business. The children were tiny. And I had a sick parent as well, because my dad had passed away from a heart attack at 59. And my mother had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's not long before he passed away. So at this stage, we as a family were caring for her as well. So I was kind of stuck in the middle of all of that. So that was hard. Those few years were difficult.
A lot of draws on your time and a lot of stress as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, working early in the morning, working late at night when the kids were in bed, trying to juggle. Like I remember, I actually said it to my husband over the weekend, I remember hiding in the car from the kids on the phone to a client. They were going, "Mommy, Mommy," and I could hear them outside. Like,
and you said, "Oh, there's some children outside. I don't know whose they are."
I remember another time my husband said to me, "Right, you go downstairs now and go into the office and work, and I'll tell them you're not in the house. I'll tell them you're gone, because otherwise they'll be banging at the door, Yeah,
when it gets into that kind of juggling, and then maybe putting the kids to bed and then checking the website to see if you've got new customers.
Yeah, so I used to log on to Google every night after the kids were in bed. And I mean, these were the days before. Nobody was on the website other than me. So the guy built it, he built it and left it. And obviously there was no money to pay anybody. So I was figuring out what to do myself. So I used to do my own blogs and, do my own updates and all of that. And I used to check where the website was on Google every night. So I remember finding it on page 14 at one point and then watching it slowly climb up the ranks. It eventually grew to be one of the busiest accountancy sites in the country.
But it's very hard, isn't it, from a marketing point of view, to get up from that page 14 or page 13 or whatever it is on Google. I remember somebody once saying that the best place to hide a dead body is on page 4 or page 5 of Google.
Nobody
or whatever.
looks past page 1.
It's a hard slog, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's constantly changing. More so now than it did in those days. In those days, but for me, and maybe it was purely ignorance on my part, I watched it climb and I was posting blogs and making changes and, having all the words. And I think I got up to page 1 by myself, if I remember correctly, for certain keywords. But now, of course, Google algorithms are changing all the time. ChatGPT's come into it. So it's a completely different landscape now than it was then.
I want to ask you a little bit about technology and the influence it may have on the future of the profession and your own business. But just at this point, the business really took off and you were working incredibly hard and juggling all of these things. But to get to a point then where you decided that it would be helpful to take in outside investment.
So the business was growing and it was after the Brexit referendum that a colleague of mine based in Derry asked would I attend a meeting. There was a lot of discussion at that time, Richard, you might remember, as a result of Brexit, would British businesses move to Ireland to be their European base, right? So this particular group thought there might be something in this and it would be worth getting together to discuss it, which is exactly what we did. But at that meeting, there was an actual investor there that I didn't know at the time. But over the following months, we continued to have discussions and they ended up investing in the business in January 2017. That was a 6-month-long conversation that we had. And I, of course, was naive because I never did it before. And I just remember being so unbelievably shocked and surprised that somebody else saw the potential within this business.
Maybe a leftover of that sense of imposter syndrome as well.
Maybe. And I definitely was naive, but I was also incredibly lucky with the people that invested in me. They were fantastic. They were great to work with. I had a brilliant experience. And I know not everybody's that lucky.
Getting outside investment is wonderful for bringing new opportunity and resources for new opportunity, but it brings its own pressures as well. Did you feel the pressure of somebody from the outside investing in your company?
Oh, I did. I felt huge pressure. I could see the opportunity and they could see the opportunity. But the only reason investors invest in a business is to make money. So I really felt the pressure to make the business work. I also wasn't experienced enough to actually look at the funds coming in and allocate them really where they should have been allocated to. So we put a lot of money into marketing, into a new website, into an e-commerce part of the website. And I didn't put any money into operations or, that side of the business at all. And I just thought, well, that's okay. We'll just keep hiring and, as the clients come in. So I didn't think about it strategically. I suppose typical entrepreneur, right? You just do it and, say yes and figure it out later. That was very much where I was. But I did feel that responsibility to run the business well and to grow the business for the sake of the investors. It's also very good from a discipline perspective because you're reporting to investors. And even though I'm an accountant, sometimes we're not great at our own numbers. The cobbler's children and all that, right?
Yeah.
So that really put manners on me from that perspective, making sure that I knew my numbers and that the numbers were right. because I had to report them every month, and I never did that before.
One of the other big challenges as a firm is growing, and particularly if you take on outside investment, is how you manage your own time. What do you spend your day doing that's to the maximum benefit of the business? Did you have to re-examine that?
Yes, and I had a huge amount of help. And I've had help all the way along this journey from loads of people and organisations. And you really can't do this by yourself. But one of the areas, whenever the investment came into the business, we took in a senior sales and marketing director at the same time. And she was really good from a sales and marketing perspective, but also teaching me where I should be spending my time. So the challenge with us accountants in practice is that obviously you're dealing with clients, right? But you can only deal with so many clients in a day or a week or a month. And that's once you get to maximum capacity, you can't grow anymore. So the only way that you can grow your business is to step back and bring in great people who can deal with the clients on your behalf. That stepping back is really hard. Stepping back from a client relationship to free up your time to actually manage the business and grow the business and work on the business.
And think about the business strategically as well.
Yeah, that's really hard. That took me about 2 years to complete that circle and to step away from the client relationships. And it was really difficult. And even to this day, I still find it probably one of the hardest things that I've had to do, because I actually love working with clients and I love helping clients out and seeing their business grow. But the reality is that there's actually much better people within Kinore now that does that.
It's obviously grown and continues to grow as well. Can you give me a snapshot of the business today in terms of its size, what kinds of clients you have and what you do for them?
Sure. So the business, whenever the investment came in 2017, and it was a small amount of investment, but it really was enough to kickstart the growth. At that time, I think I had a team of maybe about 5. Now we're almost at 80. So it's a team of 80. It is a remote team, so we are widely dispersed across the country. We work with SMEs, mainly SMEs. So those are businesses from the revenue could be 500 or 1 million right up to 10 million or 40 million or so, I think our highest is. And we do, if you think of compliance, that's essentially what we do for our clients. So payroll, VAT, accountancy, tax. And increasingly, we're doing a lot of digital work with clients. So helping them to automate their processes, helping them to transition to better systems, and to make sure that they're using the best tech stack, I suppose, within their finance function.
And that whole remote model that you developed and built has tremendous advantages, particularly post-COVID, where people want to have greater freedom, greater options, the cost of housing around the country. So people who work for you can live, in theory, anywhere in the country. And still, that must be a tremendous advantage when it comes to hiring.
It's part of our culture. And it comes from, I suppose, my own experience way back to when I realised that the client doesn't care where we do our work. And I really believe that if a professional wants to work and live wherever they choose and the client doesn't care, well, then why should the business care? There has to be the right person, though.
Is it harder to manage, whether it's the people who work for you or the clients themselves? I
would say it's definitely more challenging. In a few ways, not in the way people think. People think that, and indeed, I've been asked this question loads of times. How do you manage workflow? How do you manage deadlines? How do you manage productivity? That's the easy part, right? The systems take care of all that. The managers manage the teams, and the deadlines are met, and the clients are taken care of, right? That's the easy part. Another challenge I'm always asked about is, how do you train remotely? But actually, Richard, what I have found, it's not the trainees that's the problem. It's the trainers that have difficulty training remotely, not the trainees that have difficulty being trained. So that's all taken care of. And as I said, I'm happy with that side of the business. What's challenging is building relationships with, making sure, helping the team get to know each other as people. Because sometimes, Teams messages and emails come across in a way that they're not intended. And you need to get to know the person behind the email. And the same applies to clients. I was given great advice a few years ago. One of my non-executive directors said to me, what you save in accommodation, you put into bringing people together. And that's exactly what we do. That budget goes in to bring people together.
So you have structures around that.
Structures around that, yeah. Team events, client events. We bring people together as much as we possibly can. And I always think we can do more of that, because the more we bring people together, the more they get to know each other, the more they learn to work together, and the better results that we get. That's where the challenge is. It's not in the productivity or the efficiencies.
When you look at accountancy and some of the big changes that are taking place, technology and AI is one of them. Do you welcome it? Or is there a sense in which a lot of people are worried about the implications for the profession in the future and for employees and job numbers?
No, I welcome it. To answer your first question, I think if I look back over my career, whenever I first started, we were manually calculating payroll. We were manually doing bank reconciliations. I remember an older accountant, whenever payroll software came out first, questioning the need for payroll software, because, how do we know that it's right? And how are we training the trainees to calculate payroll? So that challenge has always been there with technology. And that remains today. The technology that we see now, okay, it's different and it's more advanced and will continue to be so. We get much faster calculations, we get better integrations, and we get better automation, obviously. So it's all a better result for the client. And if it's a better result for the client, then we have to adapt to it.
Do you think that the profession, it so much is invested in training and education around how to perform tasks that AI may well be able to perform? So therefore, accountants need to look at what other skills they need to bring to the table.
What I see lacking in the industry right now is the lack of commercial awareness. The reality of running a business, it's not just about the numbers. It's about the customer and the client, the marketing, strategy, all of those that we're not taught in accountancy school. We're also not taught about the client, the importance of customer service, where my training in hospitality was solely focused on the customer. Less so in technical training, of course, because we're really focusing on the technical elements of the job.
You've brought that experience, which was almost kind of accidental, really, from the hotel industry. Accidental in the sense that it wasn't where you were going to end up being, and it was something you did for a while. The things you learned there are valuable to you today.
Yes. So what the hospitality training gave me was an insight into the importance of the customer. Getting investment early in the business gave me an insight into the commercial realities of running a business. Those two were really crucial learnings for me and really gave me the foundation that allowed me to grow the business to what it is today. That commercial awareness or commercial training is something that I had no visibility of before I got the investment.
What about other challenges that are there? People's attitude to risk and a younger generation. Sometimes, people will dump on a younger generation and say there's this, there's that, there's this wrong with them, they're not, whatever. Do you see a change in relation to that's intergenerational about risk?
So what I've seen is that, and I can only tell you, I suppose, from my experience so far. So we've grown Kinore organically up till the middle of this year when we did our first acquisition. We did it on the 23rd of July this year. Currently, we've completed 2 acquisitions and we have another 2 that I hope will complete before the end of this year. What I hear is that the younger generation are not as willing to step into ownership roles or owner-managed roles as would have been the norm in the past. So,
why do you think that is?
Well, again, what I'm told is that they're not willing to take the risk. They don't want to put their name and as guarantor for lending, and they're happy getting a salary.
Is there an element of a post-financial crash generation about that, perhaps?
It could be that. I actually think it's more to do with how well the economy is doing right now. Because unlike for me, whenever I started the business, I had no choice. It was either do that or what? And there was no choice, well, the way I saw it. But today there's so much choice. And if you don't want to put your neck on the line, you don't have to.
People have more to lose, in a sense, because when things are going well, they have that bit more in terms of quality of life, in terms of income, so why jeopardize it?
Exactly. Why would you jeopardize it? And why would you remortgage the house or, put your name down for a personal guarantee? And there's also a much better awareness of the importance of work-life balance. And it's very hard to get a good work-life balance if you own a business, especially in the early years. It's easier as the business stabilizes. And for me, I have a great team there, and that really, really helps. But you're still always carrying business ownership, and it's a responsibility that you can't let go of on a Friday evening, unfortunately.
You talked a bit there about acquisitions. What about your future plans for the business? Where would you see it all going well in 5 or 10 years from now?
I always knew that acquisition or mergers would be part of our story as we grow. And that's the stage we're at now. So I would hope, and we plan to do further acquisitions in 26 and 27 and into 28, so that we can continue to grow organically and also acquire firms that are of similar mindset, and firms that are looking to increase efficiencies, to use technology.
Because is it tricky in one level that if you acquire a business and they're not necessarily geared up in the kind of remote model that you have developed very successfully, they have to transition into that? Is that something that's tricky to manage?
It is. It's a difficult one. And of course, those firms that are ready to sell naturally have owners that are a bit older and they're ready to retire. So they may not have embraced technology to the same extent. However, what we have seen is that the teams themselves are young, and the teams themselves are very tech savvy and maybe have not had the opportunity to embrace technology that they would like. And they're very open to it. And similarly for clients, because for the businesses or for the clients of those firms, they could also be passing to another generation. And they are also aware of technology and the benefit that it can bring. And COVID has really helped us. It has really accelerated that, I suppose, that knowledge. And there's much more acceptance now of remote working and of delivering services remotely.
And there's a trust as well, isn't
Huge
it? That trust that wasn't really there before COVID. In terms of the trust for clients and technology, if I'm a client and you're my accountant and I'm not really overly concerned about when you do things, how it operates, I just want a particular service. Despite the developments in technology, I'm still going to want my accountant. AI is not going to take over this industry.
No. I think AI will help the industry and will be a massive tool for us. And as I said already, a huge amount of manual processes will be removed and are being removed. And there's so much opportunity around integrations between, what we do and what the revenue authorities require, for example. And right now, that's still quite manual. But the business owner will still want to speak to their accountant. And that's certainly my experience now, that, we can have all of the technology, but the business owner still wants their guy or girl that they trust, that they like, that they get on well with, and that they can have a conversation with. And I don't know if that will change.
And Larissa, you talked a bit about, from your own perspective, imposter syndrome, early days, questioning your own sense of why you were in a particular role when you started off in accountancy and so forth. You have very strong views about women in business. You've been a huge supporter of women in business and the Women in Business Network in Donegal, for example. Do you think that while things are improving in relation to women in entrepreneurship, that there's still a long way to go? And that confidence issue, is that a centerpiece of that?
What I will say, first of all, is you always have to look back and look at, remember how far we have come. There's a huge amount of support for women who choose to start a business. There are so many programs and mentors and advocates there, and there's role models that were never there whenever I started. So that is fantastic. But we have a long way to go, especially in the area of funding. I think it's like 2% of funding, VC funding, goes to female-founded businesses.
Are they not looking for it, or are they looking for that funding and not getting it?
It's probably a little bit of both. So there's a large amount that aren't looking for it and should be looking for it. There's a confidence issue. You mentioned confidence. And I see this all the time with the women that we work with and in the Acorns program, where there is a belief that maybe we're just not good enough to get funding, or we don't want to put ourselves out there. We don't want to sell ourselves. We don't want to take the risk. And it's not just about equity funding. It's also about debt funding. Whenever you go for debt funding, you have to give a personal guarantee in a lot of cases. You have to put yourself out there. You have to, paint a picture of your business in terms of its growth. You have to bring other people on the journey with you. And there is a lack of confidence in women, especially, to paint that vision and to put themselves out there.
One of the ways of countering that is steadily over time that women entrepreneurs have more role models and more other very successful women entrepreneurs that they can look around and say, well, she did it and this is how. And there clearly are more, and that is moving in the right direction, isn't it?
It is moving in the right direction. It's slowly. And the more role models that women have, the better. It has to start earlier, though. I do think as well, there's an element of education here. Speaking from personal experience, the whole time around whenever the children were small and whenever I was having babies and had my children small, the reliance on me over those years was incredibly hard. And if I think about where the business was at, where the children were at, where I was at, it's really survival. So trying to think of anything around, getting the space to think about a business or grow a business or invest in a business, it's really, really hard to do that.
It's about getting through it almost.
It's about getting through it, yeah. So the more support we can give to women at that time, and we know the challenges right now in terms of childcare, for example, and the lack of support there is for young families. That's where the key is. If we can help women at that stage to start businesses and grow businesses, then we might have more chance of seeing that ripple effect in the future.
A couple of quick fire questions I'm going to throw at you before we finish. One of them is, if you were to reflect back, what was one of the best days in work or in your career you ever had?
I think, it's whenever you get the business to be a stage, and I don't think it was one particular day, but there was probably one day, and I remember it, where there was a realization. So it dawns on you suddenly that actually the business doesn't need you. That's a fantastic place to be. Whenever the business got to a stage where there was a team in place, not just a team, but a leadership team who are ambitious, and they want to grow the business. They want the best for the team. They want the best for the client, and everybody's on the same page and heading in the same direction. That's a great place to be.
Building a business is tough. There are good days and bad days, stressful days. Is there any particular time you remember when you say, "Oh my God, have I lost it here altogether? This was a mistake. This is just too much."
Oh God, so many times, Richard. I can't even count. Like my husband at one point, he used to say to me, "You have a breakdown every 6 months," where it's just, drama. I can't do it. I just can't do this anymore. I just want to hide under the covers. And there was 2 occasions that I did literally hide under the covers over the last, 14 years since 2011.
You kind of disappeared for a while, did you? Or?
Just literally hid under the covers and didn't come out. I remember one particular day where Tommy came into the room with a glass of wine as I was underneath the covers, grappling with whatever the challenge was at that time.
And you said, it's going to take more than a glass of wine.
Give me the bottle. So it happened a lot in the early days where I thought, I just can't do that. Now, that was obviously compounded by the children being young and my mother being sick and all of that, right? I remember on one mentorship program I was on, the lead said on the program, she said, the first time you come up against an issue, a difficult issue, you want to hide in bed for a week. The second time you come up against the similar issue, you have the tools, you know how to deal with it. And that is so true, because you learn and the next time you do it a bit better. So things that I would have lost sleep on or hid under the covers on 10 years ago, I don't lose sleep on anymore.
What motivates you?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a little bit of stubbornness in me, okay? I mean, this probably the same stubbornness that, saw me get first in Northern Ireland in my profession exams, that saw me qualify, coming out of a degree in hospitality. The same stubbornness that started a business in the middle of a recession with 3 small children. That stubbornness to prove people wrong, because people have always said, sure, what are you doing that for? That's hard. Would you not do this? Would you not just? That's a great lie. Would you not just, right? There's still a little bit of that even now, Richard, right? Even now in this economy, there's still a little bit of stubbornness in me that wants to prove that you can build a business in rural Ireland, you can build a business as a female entrepreneur, and you can build a remote business.
Someone would say, you've done that, you've achieved that, but you clearly want to keep going.
I do, because even I had a conversation recently with an acquaintance of mine. He questioned how, a remote business would work at scale. Where he was coming from was he was coming from a place, how would this business be attractive to somebody in the future if somebody wanted to acquire it or whatever the case might be. That's a big discussion in this industry right now. You know, there's a lot of private equity activity, you know, so this is a big major point of discussion. Would Kinore be valued differently because it's a remote model? And I've always felt, again, back to the beginning, the client doesn't care where the work is done, as long as it's done to a high standard and we're there whenever the client needs us. So why shouldn't we work wherever we want to work? Whether we're female or male or whoever, we can still be professionals and we can still do brilliant work and we can beat industry expectations in loads of ways as a remote team. And so I'm a little bit stubborn still.
So it's not just about proving that you can do it, but it's actually about proving that the model itself, this way of doing things can work.
The model works. And we all know it can work because we do it and we've been doing it for a long time. But it's still, even all these years later, it's still unusual in the market.
Finally, Larissa, what does success look like for you, for the firm, in the future down the road? What would you like it to look like?
Investment in technology is very important to me right now. So continuing to invest in development, in automation and in improving the client experience, but also making sure that my team aren't doing work that is not necessary for them to do. In other words, all those manual processes need to be removed to allow the team to serve the client and to be there when the client needs them. And that's difficult for an accountant or for any of our technical teams to do because they're so busy. And I hope that our journey of acquisitions continue and that we're able to add similar value to those firms and their clients.
Well, Larissa Feeney, it's been an absolute pleasure. Congratulations on everything you've achieved. It's extraordinary what you've done and a fascinating journey to get to this point as well. That's it from me. Until the next time, when Larissa, no doubt, will be back in the chair. Thanks for listening.